I've hosted this show for a long time, and in all those years, I have learned one simple rule. You can say almost anything you want about me, and I will let it roll off my back like rain off a tin roof. But there is exactly one line in this world that nobody, not a guest, not a critic, not a stranger with a microphone, is allowed to cross in front of me. That line has a name, my mother's name. And on the day I'm about to tell you about a woman in an expensive coat, standing on my own stage, decided to cross it on purpose, on camera, in front of millions of people, because she thought it would make her famous. She was right about one thing. It did make her famous, just not in the way she was hoping for. Before I tell you what happened on my stage, I need to tell you who she was, because the woman you are about to meet did not stumble into that chair by accident. She walked in with a plan. Her name was Eleanor Whitfield, and 2 months before she ever sat across from me, she had launched a national movement called Traditional Family Values. On paper, it sounded like something you would nod along to at Sunday dinner. Respect, morality, the sanctity of the family, a return to the way things used to be done. She gave speeches about honoring your elders. She wrote op-eds about the decline of decency in this country. She had a following, a growing one, made up of people who genuinely believed she was trying to fix something broken. But there was a second version of Eleanor Whitfield that almost nobody had met yet. Behind closed doors with her staff and her strategists, she talked about her movement the way a stock trader talks about a portfolio. She had studied the media landscape the way a general studies a battlefield, and she had come to one conclusion that she repeated to her team more than once. Nobody remembers the nice thing you said. Everybody remembers the shocking thing you did. Her strategist had booked her a slot on my show for a segment on generational values. It was supposed to be a soft, warm conversation about family and legacy. That is not the conversation Eleanor Whitfield came to have. She had already decided 3 days before she ever stepped foot in my studio that she was going to manufacture a controversy on live television, let the clip explode across every platform in the country, and ride the outrage in either direction, straight to the top of the news cycle. She did not care if people loved her for it or hated her for it. She only cared that they could not stop watching it. She picked me for a reason. I have been on television for a long time. My face is recognizable in every corner of this country. If she was going to light a match, she wanted to light it somewhere the whole world was already looking. There is a particular kind of person who has learned to treat outrage the way a fisherman treats bait, not as something ugly in itself, but as a tool, useful precisely because of how badly people want to bite down on it. Eleanor Whitfield had built her entire second act on that principle. She had watched other public figures rise and fall, and she had noticed the ones who fell the fastest were rarely the ones who did something wrong. They were the ones who did something boring. Nobody remembers boring. Everybody remembers the moment they could not look away from. Her team had rehearsed contingency plans for nearly every version of that morning. What if the host got angry? What if the host walked off? What if security intervened? What none of them had planned for, because none of them thought it was a realistic outcome, was a version of that morning where I simply stayed calm and let her own words do all the damage on their own. The morning she walked out, I did what I do with every guest. I smiled. I extended my hand. I opened with a warm introduction, because that is simply how I was raised to treat a person the first time I meet them, regardless of what I might already suspect about them privately. I did not even finish my sentence. Oh, a cute little chimpanzee. How are you, Black Big Mouth? The words landed in that studio like a dropped plate in a silent kitchen. 300 people who had been laughing and settling into their seats 30 seconds earlier went completely, instantly still. I felt my own smile freeze on my face the way a smile does when the muscles keep holding a shape the rest of you has already abandoned. I did not react, not right away. I have been doing this too long to hand a guest the reaction she is fishing for on the very first cast of her line. I let my hand stay extended, calm, patient, the way you would offer a hand to somebody who might simply be having a difficult morning. She looked at my hand like I had offered her something spoiled. Take it back! You expect me to shake that dirty black hand? A gasp moved through the audience, the kind of sound 300 people make together without planning to. I lowered my hand slowly. I did not slam it down. I did not snatch it back. I simply let it return to my side, the way you would set down something you had offered in good faith and had watched get refused in bad faith. In that moment, I understood something with total clarity. This was not an accident. This was not a nervous woman misspeaking under studio lights. This had been rehearsed somewhere in front of a mirror or a team of advisors until it came out smooth enough to sound spontaneous on live television. This was a plan, wearing the costume of an outburst. Still, I did not raise my voice. I have never once believed that meeting cruelty with cruelty makes a man look strong. It only tells you he has run out of better tools. Ma'am, you came here to talk about traditional family values. I think your behavior right now is not suitable for someone who claims to represent those values. She laughed. It was not a nervous laugh. It was a satisfied one. Traditional values, Steve, people already know me. By the end of tonight, everyone will know me even more than they know you. And there it was. She had said the quiet part out loud without even realizing she had done it. She was not here to discuss values. She was here to become a headline, and she was willing to use whatever material was closest at hand to do it, including me. I tried one more time to steer the moment back towards something resembling decency. Why are you talking like this? You're supposed to be representing respect, family, and dignity. But everything you're doing right now is the exact opposite. She was not listening to me. Her eyes had already left my face. They were scanning the desk between us, hunting for something, the way a person hunts for the loudest possible way to finish what they started. And then her eyes landed on my phone. It was resting face up on the desk, the way it always does before a taping, silenced but visible. And on the lock screen, the way it has been for years, was a photograph of my mother. It is not a glamorous picture. It is not a studio portrait. It is just a woman in her Sunday dress standing on her own front porch, smiling the exact smile she used to give me every single time I walked through her front door. Whether I was 9 years old or 49, I watched something shift in Eleanor Whitfield's expression, a kind of recognition, a calculation. She had found the door she had been looking for, and she was not going to hesitate before walking through it. Oh, Steve, I see a lady chimpanzee on your phone's wallpaper. There is a particular kind of silence that has nothing empty about it. It is not the silence of a room with nothing happening. It is the silence of every single person in that room understanding all at once that something has just happened that cannot be taken back. That was the silence that fell over my studio in that instant. I froze. For half a second, I told myself I had misheard her, that surely she had not just said what I thought she said about a woman who had been in the ground for years. A woman who had raised 5 children on almost nothing. A woman whose photograph I have kept on my phone every single day since the day she left us. Because some part of me has never wanted to go a single hour without seeing her face. But I had heard her correctly, and she knew I had heard her correctly, because she was watching my face the way a person watches a fuse they have just lit. If you have ever sat across from someone who tried to turn your grief into their entertainment, and you know exactly what that helpless, burning silence feels like, comment the word "seen" below and stay with me. Because what happened in the next 60 seconds of that broadcast is the part of this story I think about the most. I did not speak for 30 seconds. To the control room, it must have looked like a technical failure. My producer would tell me later that he genuinely thought my earpiece had gone dead because I have never in my career gone 30 seconds without filling dead air. My stage manager, a good man named Frank Delaney, who has worked beside me for 11 years, took one step toward the stage before catching himself and stopping. But I was not frozen. I was not in shock, though I understood why it might have looked that way to anyone watching from outside of my own skin. I was doing something much more deliberate. I was deciding, second by second, exactly what kind of man I was going to let this moment turn me into. In the first few seconds, I simply heard the words again in my head, turning them over, making sure I had understood them correctly and was not about to overreact to something I had misjudged. I had not misjudged it. In the next stretch of seconds, I noticed my own hands resting on the desk in front of me. You stop feeling your hands after enough years in front of a camera. They become furniture. But I felt them in that moment. They were trembling, very slightly, in the particular way a hand trembles when the man attached to it has just made the decision not to close it into a fist. After that, I thought about my mother, not the version of her that lives in the stories I tell on stage, but the real one. I thought about her coming home from her double shift, sitting down at our kitchen table and putting her head down on her own forearm for one single minute before standing back up to make dinner for 5 children. I thought about what that minute must have cost a woman who never once complained about the cost. And I thought about a stranger in an expensive coat who had just decided out loud on national television that a minute like that did not count for anything. Then I thought about every mother sitting in my studio audience that morning and every mother watching from home who had ever been told by someone who did not know her name and had never set foot in her kitchen that she was not raising her children the right way. I thought about what I owed all of them in that moment. And somewhere in the final seconds of that silence, I made my decision. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet. It did not shake. I've been told since by people who watched the tape back that I looked less angry than tired, like a man setting down something heavy he had not realized he was still carrying. You disrespect my mother. I let the words sit there for a moment before I finished them. I can take a joke about myself. I can take an insult about myself. But you don't get to disrespect my mother. She tried, even then, to shrink the moment down to something small enough to walk away from. Oh, come on, Steve. It was just marketing. I do not think I have ever felt genuine disbelief on live television before that morning. Marketing? I let that single word hang there because I wanted her and everyone watching to hear exactly how small and how ugly it sounded out loud. You came onto this stage, insulted me, refused to shake my hand, called me names, and then dragged my mother into it, all because you wanted attention? She did not answer that. For the first time since she had walked onto my stage, Eleanor Whitfield had nothing prepared to say. I kept my voice level, but I let her hear exactly where I stood. If you were not my mother's age, I honestly don't know what I would do right now. But I was raised to respect my elders. The audience was completely silent. I gestured calmly toward the space between us, toward the whole stage, the whole show, the whole idea of what that morning was supposed to have been. But respect is earned through behavior, and what you just did was disrespectful. Then I said the only thing left to say, please leave the show right now. For the first time since she had sat down, I watched the confidence drain out of Eleanor Whitfield's face. She had walked in expecting a version of me that would explode, shout, maybe even reach for her. Something ugly enough and loud enough to guarantee a headline by lunchtime. She had not planned for a version of me that would simply, quietly, ask her to leave. The clip did exactly what she had hoped it would do. It did not exactly do it the way she had hoped. Within hours, it had been clipped, captioned, and shared across every platform that exists. By evening, it had climbed past 10 million views. By the next morning, it had doubled that. Eleanor Whitfield had wanted the world's attention, and for 1 week, she had it completely. But attention is not the same thing as approval, and she had confused the two. Instead of rallying behind her people, began pulling up her old speeches, the ones about respect, about family, about honoring your elders and treating strangers with basic human decency, and setting them side by side with the clip from my stage. The contrast did more damage to her than any statement I could have made. Commentators ask the same question over and over in different words. How can a woman build an entire movement on the word respect and then humiliate a stranger's mother for a camera? Her own organization began distancing itself from her within days. Supporters who had defended her publicly for years suddenly had nothing to say. Within 2 weeks, the leadership of traditional family values voted to remove her from the movement she herself had founded. The controversy she had engineered to make her famous overnight did exactly that. It just was not the kind of fame she had been chasing. I did not celebrate any of it. I want to be honest about that because it would be easy to tell this story as though watching her career collapse felt satisfying, and it did not. I remember scrolling past headline after headline that week, each one sharper than the last, and feeling something closer to sadness than victory. I had not wanted to destroy her. I had only wanted her to stop in that one moment, on my stage, in front of my mother's memory. Everything that happened after that was not my doing. It was simply the weight of her own choices finally landing somewhere she could not redirect them. There is a difference between consequences and cruelty, and I think that difference gets lost more often than it should. I had not called for anyone to come after her. I had not named her organization or her donors or her family in anything I said on that stage. I had simply told the truth about what she did, in the plainest words I had, and let the rest of the country decide for themselves what to do with it. What they decided to do with it was not gentle, but it was not mine to soften either, not yet. That would come later, and when it did, I made sure it came from me directly, not from a headline written by somebody else. If this story has reminded you that the loudest stun in the room does not always win, and that character has a way of catching up with people eventually, share this video with one person who needs to hear that today, and then keep watching because the story is not finished yet. I thought on the morning that segment aired that I had already lived through the hardest part of the story. I was wrong. The hardest part was still 2 weeks away, and it walked out onto my stage wearing a very different expression than the one I remembered. It happened during a taping of Family Feud. A group of contestants had been announced, and as they made their way to the podium, I glanced down the line the way I always do, greeting faces, settling nerves. And then I stopped. Standing in that line, out of place, visibly out of her depth, was Eleanor Whitfield. There was no campaign behind her this time, no press waiting outside, no camera crew angling for the most damaging frame. Just an elderly woman in a plain coat, standing where she had no business standing, looking like she had aged 5 years in 14 days. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. Ma'am, please go back behind the stage. I don't want to see you here. Her eyes filled instantly. Steve, please, just let me explain. I already heard enough 2 weeks ago. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, the practiced composure of a public figure entirely gone from her. I know what I did was wrong. I said nothing. I let her keep going because a person who is finally telling the truth deserves at least that much room. Steve, I'm your mother's age. I stayed quiet. And you once told people to respect women of my generation. I don't have a child. I never had a son. Her voice began to break apart on her. So when I look at you, I wish I had a son like you. Please forgive me. The studio had gone completely still, the same stillness I remembered from 2 weeks earlier, except this time it was not shock filling the room. It was something closer to grief. Son, I'm sorry. I looked at her for a long moment before I answered. Ma'am, I forgive you. Relief moved across her face, immediate and visible. But I was not finished, and I wanted to be exact about what forgiveness was and was not offering her. But please don't force me to call you my mother. Her expression sobered. I respect you because you're an older woman. I respect your age. But what you did to my mother was something I cannot simply erase. I let that settle before I continued. You don't deserve to be called my mother just because you apologized. A mother is someone who protects, loves, and respects. My mother gave me that. I could hear the audience shifting, some of them openly emotional now. What you did that day was done for attention. You turned someone's pain into your marketing strategy. And that's something I will never forget. Then I softened because cruelty was never the point. Not even now, not even after everything. But I don't hate you. Her eyes filled again, differently this time. I forgive you. I just don't want to remember what happened that day anymore. I turned away from her then toward the 300 people sitting in front of me because there was something I needed to say to them directly, and it mattered more than anything I could say to her. And listen to me carefully. I don't want anybody watching this show to go online and attack this woman. The room went silent again. A different kind of silent, the kind that happens when people realize they are being asked to do something harder than outrage. She made a terrible mistake. She said terrible things. She hurt my mother. But if you love me, don't turn my pain into somebody else's hate. I meant every word of it. If you really respect me, don't send this woman hate. Don't threaten her. Don't attack her family. Let her live with the lessons she learned. I looked back at Eleanor Whitfield, standing there with her hands folded in front of her like a woman waiting for a verdict. She made a mistake. And today, she came back and admitted it. I turned back to the audience one final time. That's what accountability looks like. The applause that followed was not the loud celebratory kind. It was slower, heavier, the kind of applause that comes from people who have just understood something about grace they had not expected to learn on a Tuesday afternoon. You can forgive somebody without pretending they never hurt you. Eleanor Whitfield stood there crying, not performing it for a camera this time, just crying the way a person cries when they have finally set down something they have been carrying too long. Ma'am, I forgive you. Now go forward and become the person you claimed you were when you first started talking about family values. The applause rose again, stronger this time, and this time she did not flinch from it. She simply nodded once and let it hold her up. If you believe forgiveness and accountability can live in the same sentence and that the strongest response to cruelty is not more cruelty, subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell. Because we tell the stories that remind people what dignity actually looks like when nobody is forcing it. Here is the part of the story I want you to carry with you longer than the rest of it. The woman who once tried to build a movement by tearing someone else down did not get destroyed by me. I never once called her a name. I never once wished her harm on that stage or off of it. She was undone by the simple, quiet arithmetic of her own choices, laid out in public for everyone to see side by side. That is not revenge. That is just what happens when the truth is finally allowed to stand next to the performance. And when she came back 2 weeks later, broken and honest in a way she had never once been while chasing headlines, I did not use that moment to finish what the internet had already started. I used it to end the story the only way my mother ever taught me a story like that should end, with the door still open, even for the person who had hurt me. That is the whole lesson. You can hold somebody accountable for what they did without becoming someone who enjoys watching them suffer for it. You can forgive a person completely and still refuse to pretend the wound never happened. Both of those things can be true in the very same breath. I think about my mother every single day. I do not think I have to explain to any of you why. But I will tell you this. Nothing anyone says about her on any stage, in any studio, in front of any camera is ever going to be the last word on who she was. I get the last word on that. And the last word is always going to be love. I have fought a great deal in the time since about why that particular insult cut deeper than 30 years of other insults ever managed to. I have been called worse things about myself by worse people than Eleanor Whitfield, and none of it ever cost me a night's sleep. But my mother spent her entire life being underestimated by people who never once sat at her table, and I think some part of me has been quietly standing guard over her memory ever since she left us, waiting for exactly the moment when somebody would try it one more time so that I could finally say out loud in front of everyone what I had been carrying in silence for years. Eleanor Whitfield did not know she was handing me that opportunity. She thought she was taking something from me. Instead, without meaning to, she gave me the room to say something I had never found the right stage for. That, more than anything else, is what I want you to take from this story. The people who try to wound you by going after the ones you love rarely understand what they are actually doing. They are not discovering your weakness. They are handing you a reason to finally say out loud and without apology exactly how much that person meant to you. Use it. Do not waste it on rage. Spend it on love instead, because love is the only thing that outlasts a headline. If somebody in your life has ever needed to hear that forgiveness is not weakness and that dignity will always outlast a headline, subscribe to this channel right now and share this story with them. The next one might be exactly what somebody you love needs to hear today. Take care of the people who raised you while you still have the chance to. Call your mother tonight if you can. Sit with her memory a little longer if you cannot. And whatever anyone ever says about you on any stage, in any room, in front of any camera, remember that the truth about who you are was decided a long time ago by the person who raised you. And no stranger with a microphone gets to rewrite it. Thank you, Mama. I will see you in the next one.